So I would like to welcome everyone who's now attending the first panel of the Transfer Students Panel series by College Leap. This series of student panels for transfer students is an online webinar series held to bridge the information gap between community college students and four-year institutions. As you bear with me, let me introduce a little bit more and in greater details College Leap. So College Leap is a nonprofit organization aiming to empower community college transfer students, especially internationals, by providing leadership, mentorship, internship, and volunteer opportunities, and by building many projects and programs. So you can find more information about our projects and events on our website, collegeleap.cc. You can also apply to become a chapter leader at your college, and you can start, if there is not one yet, you can start your own chapter. So if you're interested in doing so, you can learn more about the application process on the website as well. Now back to TSPS. So it is a program under the Transfer Council at College Leap to fill in the information gap between community colleges and four-year universities. This full series is free and open to all community college students. There will be many other panels starting today with UC Berkeley until the end of February. The upcoming sessions are UCLA, UC San Diego, UC Santa Barbara, and UC Davis. And the goal is to cover about 20 to 25 UCs, private universities, out of states, and Ivy Leagues. You will find all the information you need on our website also regarding upcoming panels under the transfer panels section, which will be updated along the way and as time goes on. The sessions will be recorded and posted on our webpage. So before starting today's panel, I would like to add a little disclaimer. The information shared on TSPS only represents panelists' personal opinions and should not be depended solely on to make any decision. College Leap is not in any way responsible for the information shared in TSPS, and you should always consult your college advisors before making any changes in your educational plan. So today's panelists will share their experiences at their current universities, their transfer experiences and tips, as well as their community college educational journey and extracurricular suggestions. At the end of the session, you will have the opportunity to join a breakout room to ask more questions to the panelists of your choice. And without further ado, I will let the panelists introduce themselves and start this first TSPS session. Thank you, everyone. Allison, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, I would love to. So hi, everyone. My name's Allison. I'm a current senior at UC Berkeley at the Haas School of Business. So my major is business administration. I went to community college in the Bay Area over at Chabot College in Hayward. And I graduated, or I transferred it must have been fall 2019, I believe. So this is my senior year. I'm really excited to talk more about my experiences, and it was nice meeting you all.
Thank you. All right, thank you, Allison. Asuka, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself as well? If you can hear me. We can hear you. I'm pretty sure you're still muted.
Oh, sorry. Hi, guys. Nice to share my experience with you guys. I'm a junior transfer student at UC Berkeley. I'm majoring in ECS, and I transferred from Foothill College this year. Yeah, just very excited.
All right, thank you. Nicholas, go ahead.
Hey, yeah, it's so lovely to talk with you all. I actually transferred from Foothill College as well as Suka to Berkeley back in the fall of 2017. Then spent about a fifth year senior thing where I actually got a government grant, the Gilman Scholarship, to study Arabic in Jordan. So I technically graduated this last spring, though I was off campus for a full year. And now I'm a recipient of the Gardner Fellowship, and I'm actually living in Washington, D.C., and I'm working at USAID, which is the U.S. Agency for International Development. So yeah, and then in addition, like I also volunteer doing a lot of community college advising. And so Jay talked about all the wonderful stuff at College Leap and the opportunity to speak with you all. I'm just so excited to chat. So it's also lovely to meet Joanna, Allison, Athanase, and everyone else who's making this happen. So looking forward to talking.
Thank you. Thank you so much. All right, and Joanna, do Do you want to go
Hello.
ahead?
Yeah. Hello, my name is Joanna Shui. I am currently majoring in English and I'm a senior. Like Allison, I transferred fall of 2019. My experiences have been pretty interesting so far as a transfer student, and I would love to share on what it's like being a transfer student, how to make adjustments here on campus, and what you should probably look for if you would like to apply to UC Berkeley or just apply to any other UC. So I'm very happy to be speaking with my fellow panelists today and really happy to share some information too.
Thank you. Thank you so much. All right, so we can go ahead with the first questions of this panel. Allison, if you want to start, I'll start with the first question. So what do you think made you stand out from the applicants when you were applying as a transfer student to UC Berkeley?
Yeah, I think as an applicant, you always want to make yourself stand out. And so it gets to a point when you're transferring from, or if you're trying to transfer to UC Berkeley, where everyone's GPA is pretty much the same, and that it's probably most likely in the high threes. So it's really like, it came down for me to the extracurriculars in terms of trying to broaden out my resume and really think about how I wanted to tell my story and what I wanted to include in my application letters. So I guess it really came down to, for me, my work experience as kind of being, I worked in the marketing kind of space for a while, and then I kind of was entrepreneurial soon afterwards. So that kind of helped my application very much. And then also my kind of independence in working like as a bartender and a server, I think that made me stand out, and it was a bit different. And I think people kind of gravitate to those differences.
That sounds good. Did you do all those opportunities at the same time you were studying?
Yeah, in community college.
All right, thank you. So next question for Asuka. That is the exact same one, but if you want me to repeat, just let me know.
Oh, hi. So I think on top of what Alison just said, I would recommend also for my major, I'm in ECS. So if you want to stand out, because everyone's GPA is like 4.0. So if you really want to stand out, you need to let UC Berkeley know that you are well prepared. So I highly recommend take there's 2 courses in Diablo Valley College that is equivalent to CS 61A and B. And if you finish that one before you transfer, that will highly increase the rate to get in. You can just search it in the CIST, that website. And so what I did is I finished all the 61 series before I transferred. And I think that really helped me out.
Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
It's a required lower division courses at Berkeley for ECS, and most of the community college they don't provide that courses. So only in Diablo Valley College and Laney College, that 2 colleges, they have that course. So if you finish that before you transfer, it's a high chance that you will get in. And make sure you are 4.0 GPA.
Thank you for the advice. All right, Nicholas, it's your turn.
Yeah, and it's like, so everyone I met in Berkeley in my major, they are all the same GPA. So you should make sure on top of the straight A's, you need to have like additional courses, like specifically for Berkeley, if you really want to stand out.
All right, thank you.
Just for UC Berkeley, yeah.
Thank you, Nicholas.
Yeah, actually, I think I'm actually going to go a bit in the opposite direction. I actually think there isn't really a science, right? Even if I know people who, if you apply, right, to a school like Berkeley or UCLA or any of the other big schools, right, even if you do quote unquote everything right, it is a matter of finding the best fit for you. And I think that there's many people, and I know many people in the transfer community speak honestly about this too, is like, and we'll get into this in a bit, right? Of like, it's more so about finding the right fit for you. What size of institution do you want, right? How do you like urban environments? Do you like campus environments? And so we'll get into that. But I wanted to go more actually back to Allison's point more about non-traditional experience, because I think that this is something that community college students don't realize that we have really, and that the non-traditional and transfer student communities, that's actually really a repository of strength. Non-traditional experience, caregiving experience, holding down a job, having to like overcome adversity, right? Whether that's low income, whether that's being a first gen person, the knowledge barriers, economic barriers, those are important things that you definitely should be proud of, that you've overcome to get into this position. Whether you're going to somewhere like UC Berkeley, UC Irvine, a CSU, it doesn't matter. At any stage of when you're submitting an application, I think it's really important to embrace that non-traditional experience that society tells you typically is like, oh, is not important, but it really is. And having gone through this and talked with dozens of professors and now working full-time, right, that those non-traditional experiences actually help you more than anything else. And that as long as you can put that into an application and capitalize on that when you're just going into approaching transferring, that's really important. Just like one quick example, because I know we have a lot of stuff to cover today. But so like I studied Arabic language. My double major was in anthropology and Arabic, and Foothill College didn't have any Arabic classes. So I went to a mosque. So I went to a mosque in Santa Clara and like took Arabic classes at a local mosque for a full year, right? That wasn't on my transcript. It wasn't part of a GPA. It wasn't part of anything, it wasn't part of anything that I submitted in an academic packet. But that kind of non-traditional experiences and those things that show initiative, show resiliency, show creativity, those are things that you can actually use while you're at community college to really strengthen your applications in ways that just playing the numbers game and test scores and everything is in addition to that. So we'll get into all of this more, I'm sure.
Yeah, thank you. All right, so Joanna, if you want to go ahead.
I also forgot to mention earlier that unlike most of my panelists here, I've actually come from SoCal, and the community college I transferred from is Orange Coast College, if you guys are familiar with that. So it was definitely an out-of-body experience, and I did not see myself at Berkeley at first because it just felt like it was so different from what I was used to. So I feel like really pushing yourself out of your comfort zone sometimes is definitely something that you should be aware of and be comfortable with being uncomfortable as a transfer student, because you are competing with a lot of other transfer students. But at the same time, I feel like as a transfer student, you bring so much more. You've had more time to refine your craft. You have more time to explore what you really want to do, what you really want to study. And like Nicholas, I feel like a lot of non-traditional experiences do really help you stand out as an individual. Also, based on my past experiences, I was volunteering at this organization called Working Road Trips, and it basically helps previously incarcerated people or people who are trying to get back into the workforce or who are veterans, basically find jobs again or just get back into it, find their career paths, find what they're interested in. So as part of just for personal enrichment and as part of being an English major, I really wanted to help. So I helped them edit their resumes and look through their profiles and seeing how they could appeal to potential employers, appeal to potential industries that they want to work in. So as a form of personal enrichment, as a form of just kind of giving back to the community, that's what I did. And I feel like, that definitely helped me understand the importance of not just education in general, but also being able to, put yourself out there and being uncomfortable.
That's a really interesting story. I'm pretty sure we'll get more deeper into it a little bit later on. So we'll go on to the next question, which is more general. Mostly it is, what would be the top tip you would give the audience on how to maintain a good GPA, and what was yours when you transferred or when you applied for UC Berkeley, if you remember? So Allison, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, so my top tip would be to go to office hours and have great relationships with your professors in terms of getting a good GPA. I think it's important to remember that that professors see anywhere from 100 to 300 students in one semester, and I always thought it was important for them, whenever they saw my name on a piece of paper or online, they would remember my face. I would always want my professors to know exactly who I was when they were grading my paper, rather than just some name that they can mark up and grade horribly. So it was always good to have that personal relationship with my professors when I could. And then my GPA when I applied was a 4.0. But by the time I transferred, that last semester was really rough for me. So it was a 3, I want to say it was a 3.8.
All right, still really good. All right, so Asuka, do you want to go ahead and share your experience about that?
Sure. So my just only one sentence for my tip is don't be late. Just be on time. Don't just finish your assignment and prepare for exam like 2 weeks before the final. That's all my tip, because honestly everything in community college is way easier than those in university. So I believe if you just work hard and just don't procrastinate, and you will succeed. I think that's just finish everything on time and prepare for final just in advance. That's my advice. Yeah, that's what I did during my past 2 years. Just be on time and finish everything on time. Don't procrastinate. And yeah, that's pretty much I have done.
All right.
Yeah,
Thank
to
you for the
maintain the
advice.
4.0.
Do you remember what your GPA was? You had a 4.0 when you transferred?
Like straight A.
Okay.
Yeah. That's like a requirement for ESS.
Okay. Thank you. All right, Nicholas.
So
your advice.
Asuka, I was chuckling while you were telling your story because I think so you should know yourself, know your sleep schedule. The lowest grade that I ever got in the class was a 5-day-a-week, 8 a.m. language class. And like, it was not because I couldn't do the content. It was, I did well in all of the tests, all of the exams. It was legit because I just couldn't get up in the morning to take an 8 a.m. 5 days a week. So just be very aware of yourself and your schedule, how you tick, like how do you do lunch breaks? Look at the final schedule, right? What does the final schedule look like? Are they all back to back? Are they on the same day? Do you have them spread out? Those are all really important things to consider, like considering your kind of biorhythms, considering how you tick, considering how you learn, structuring for success, not just with content, but with like the literal structure of the course and how it's being delivered. And then the last thing I was going to say, kind of building from Allison's point, is also to lead with curiosity. Because I think that one of the differences between education on the whole is a whole bunch of checklists, right? It's like you have to do this class that leads to this kind of high upper division. And one of the key things I definitely did not understand while in community college was the difference between lower division coursework and upper division coursework, and the level of research intensity, especially in the social sciences, that was required. So I would just say is like, if you cultivate curiosity while you're at the community college level, choose like, what are some topics that you find interesting within your discipline, right? What is kind of a specific expertise, quote unquote, that you start to claim for yourself? That's a really important thing. And that will help you also distinguish yourself when you're talking to professors, right? Because they can also tell, right? They can tell when you really care about what you're doing. They can tell when you're passionate about it. They can tell. And that I think is when you're talking about building relationships, right? It's about how do you find the professor that it works in the area you're passionate about, and how do you develop that passion for yourself? And when you're talking about developing a deep recommendation letter, so for example, right now I'm working on applying to graduate school, which I know for all of you is probably something very far away from what you're thinking, but that's something that you constantly you're constantly building a relationship around a passion. And that passion extends with many of these people 3, 4, 5 years, right? Across your educational journey. I'm still actually have someone from my community college who's writing a letter of rec for grad school. And so it's just important to think about how you structure passion into your life. And then that will help get the success you're trying to find. And then as to the GPA question, I actually had like a 3.5. So I was like definitely in the lower end, I think, of what Cal usually accepts. So.
Thank you. That was some good advice. Joanna?
Building off of Nicholas's point, I think having a game plan and planning out your schedule throughout the semester is important. knowing when is better for you to overload certain courses. If you know this course is more research intensive, or there's more reading involved, or it's just a harder subject, to not overload that particular semester and take it more easy because your focus needs to be on that particular class. I know a lot of my fellow transfer students who did overload on particular semesters, and they were always very stressed and not getting enough sleep. So I think just making a game plan of knowing when to take what class, when you should take certain classes in conjunction with one another, is definitely important. So you make sure that by the time you do transfer, you ended up taking all the classes you wanted to take. And also just for academic enrichment as well, you're taking the classes at the community college that your university won't, offer, or is just different. So if you wanted to take certain courses that other universities don't offer, to just take those for your personal gain, or if it's really interesting, just go ahead and take those. And for me, I ended up transferring for 3.9 because a math class messed me up. You're not good at math, don't take a too hard math class, is what I would also say.
That is a great advice. Thank you. Okay, so one question that has been really recurring was, what are the courses you think are very valuable to your transfer results and you as an individual, and why, if that made a difference when you transferred? So Allison, if you can just start ahead. Thank you.
Yeah, so for me, I had major tunnel vision. I wasn't really dabbling around in a lot of classes. I just kind of wanted to take all of the courses that I knew were going to get me into my dream route, or my dream program. So I ended up applying for Berkeley and San Francisco State. And so they had completely different requirements, since one was a UC and one was a Cal State University. And I changed my major a few times in community college as well. So each time I changed, I would have to kind of re-up on all of those course requirements that I had to take, and make sure all of my boxes were checked. So I didn't end up having space to dabble around in a lot of classes, just because I was solely focused on getting all of my major requirements out of the way. But that was my main priority. And I usually got that information from seeing an academic counselor, or just going straight to the actual institution that I wanted to transfer into. And I would seriously recommend doing your own homework when it comes to course planning. I can talk more about this later, but I've been working on kind of a program that helps students with their major requirements, and getting all the information they need, and kind of cutting through the information of course planning. So if anyone would like to talk to me about that as well, I would love to.
I think we'll cover that in the next question, but thank you. Is there, so other than your requirements that you did for the majors you were trying to choose, is there any other class that you took just, as a supplement to make sure that you would get into a school?
I don't remember. I don't think so. No, I think I was very much tunnel visioned at that point.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. All right, Asuka?
Yes. So as I mentioned before, I highly recommend taking the equivalent class at Diablo Valley College for CS 61A, 61B and C, and the one class in Lady College for CS 61A. And those are really, really important for UC Berkeley. And actually, I did take other courses that are not required by UC Berkeley in order for UCLA and UCSD, and I get in, but I didn't attend. But just for suggestion, there's a program in Foothill called TAP. That's an honors program that if you finish, I think it's 23 honors units at Foothill College, and your chance to get into UCLA will increase, like significantly increase. So I did take lots of honors courses, even though I didn't attend UCLA, but that really helped me. And also I took some Python classes just for supplement, and it is not required by any of the UCs, but just for personal interest. And I did benefit from it because I found some internship after taking those data science and Python classes. So if you have time, I would recommend you take some Python like stats class for your personal interest or for internship, something like that. So on top of the major requirement.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, that's really good that you mentioned the honors program at Foothill, because it does help a lot of students getting in, or at least having better chances at getting in UCLA, but also other schools. So thank you. All right, Nicholas, I think you're still muted.
Yeah, no, I was thinking. I think like what I'm actually gonna do is kind of continue along the same vein of advice that I've been giving, which is just that it's okay to get weird. Like it's okay to get weird with your classes, right? I think it's very easy to, I'm also the kind of person that likes to like say, here's the pipeline, right? Here's, you do this class, it leads to this, it leads to that. And it's important, as Allison and Asuka were stressing, to do that, right? It's important to think about what do you have to do to get to where you want to go. But I think it's also very, very important to recognize that while you're at community college, you have so much freedom, right? To be able to take classes in anything. And to be honest, I'm sure that everyone who's on this call and are either at four-year schools or have graduated from four-year schools understands, like you land on campus and suddenly you feel it, right? You feel the pressure. You're like, holy cow, holy cow. Like I only have like 2 years on this campus, right? That feels like no time at all. It goes by very, very fast. And so I guess what I would just say, rather than saying any specific class, because I think that for every single person's specific class, it's individual, right? If you're studying EECS, you need to talk with people who are doing EECS. If you're studying a social science preparation for a PhD program, you need to talk to someone about that. If you're thinking about law school, you need to get very specific advice for law school. And so more generally, and this is especially when you're talking about creating strong applications, which is the way the question was framed, right? It's like, what's courses you take to get in to somewhere like Berkeley that has a competitive process? I would say, rather than saying, what's something for your academic plan, what's on about your plan, right? If you love theater, go take theater classes, right? And enjoy that, dive into that, make that part of you and your personality and your experience. Because that's going to make you more rounded and have more emotional and mental fortitude to be able to actually continue in the long haul of this. And again, like I'm not a professional academic advisor. I don't review UC Berkeley applications. None of us do. And so we can give advice, but at the end of the day, it's really about your journey and seeking the resources that you need from people that are in the position to comment on that specific journey that you're on.
Thank you. All right, so on to Joanna.
So besides, like Allison, I did have tunnel vision a little bit, taking a lot of overloading on English courses. But as I got those more out of the way, I decided to delve more into creative writing and research, because research in English is kind of interesting, but also I feel like research in most majors are pretty interesting. They're much more different from your standard essay or standard papers. Like you need to go and read more about different resources. You need to read about philosophy. Sometimes you need to delve into articles or political theory. So it's definitely a more of an intense process and a more laborious process. So because you have to go through the time to really single out particular resources that you want, and then add that into your paper and make sure your argument flows. So if you guys have the opportunity, if you guys are in humanities majors or even just different subjects, I think research classes are pretty important, or you can just take one to just see what that kind of writing style is like. Because in sciences, I believe you do have to create reports at times, and the writing style is pretty similar to how you do a research paper. And on top of my English courses, I also took some communication classes, which I thought were pretty fun, interesting, but also things that you don't really think about, how you communicate with people and how you form connections and how you appeal to certain people. For example, when you're talking to a professor, when you're talking to someone of higher academic, of higher seniority, how you like to address them, how you make yourself feel comfortable in that situation. So I took interpersonal communication, I took public communication, I also took public speaking to get myself more familiar with how to present in front of a crowd and to talk with many different people and, you know, deal with different personalities and working through that. So I thought that was a pretty interesting course in which you don't really think about these things all the time, but they're actually pretty important. So just taking courses from the side in which you feel like, I kind of have an interest in this, but I don't see how it'd be useful. Just go ahead and take those courses because they usually end up being useful in some way or another.
Thank you. That is actually really true. The more you're interested, the more you feel like, you know, you can give yourself into it and relate it later to your major. All right, let's go on to the next question because we do have a lot to cover. And I see that some people are putting way more questions in the chat. So I just want to remind everyone that you'll have the opportunity for the last 30 minutes to ask your questions, so they won't be left unanswered. So if you could name 2 or 3 experiences that you feel are the most important to you as a transfer student, like leadership, internship, volunteering, those kind of experiences, what would those be? Allison, if you could go ahead.
Yeah, I would say leadership is number one. If you can kind of show that you were a leader and not just kind of on a team, or, I mean, team things are good, but if you can pinpoint exactly what you did to help the team, I think that's really important. And I think a lot of people kind of looked by that. So I would say leadership and really being confident in your decision-making abilities and kind of being that leader that people want to have at their schools is really important. For number 2, I would say an internship.
Wait, let me... Okay. Faye, can you mute everyone? Thank you. Right. Allison, if you can just unmute yourself. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So internship would be number 2 for me. I think having an internship and showing that you have some real world experience is really helpful. And that internship doesn't necessarily have to be an internship, like in the formality of it. It could be something a little bit more off the beaten path, like for me, bartending. Like just kind of showing that you have taken responsibility and you do other things other than go to school, I think is really important. And just showing that you kind of work well with other people outside of academia. And then number 3, I would have to say, this one's tricky. I would say confidence is really important. So just being confident in your own abilities and having confidence from the second you step on your community college to the second you apply. I think that confidence is really what people sees through your applications, and the way you write about yourself is really important. So I know it's a bit awkward for people to write about themselves in like these very highlighted ways, and people think it's a bit egotistical sometimes, but it's just something you have to do. And I know it's uncomfortable, but I would say that confidence, and really coming at it as confidence and not necessarily, you know, being like a brag. I think just having that confidence is so important, and a lot of people kind of forget about that aspect.
Do you have any leadership or internship example that you personally did when you were in community college?
Yeah, so actually I would say my leadership came with my marketing firm. So I was working on projects myself, and that was kind of like I didn't necessarily have a team under me, but my leadership came with working with my superiors and really working on individual projects myself. And I remember talking a lot in my essay about how, you know, I brought a project from ideation to the end, pretty much, to the product. So like going through that whole process, I think is really important for people to see. And like I said, kind of being able to pinpoint exactly what you did in a team is so much more important than saying that you were a part of a team.
Yeah, that's for sure. Thank you. Asuka, can you answer the same question? So example or experiences that you've had as a transfer student?
Yeah. So the first, the first top thing I think is the internship I did. So I interned in a smartphone company last summer and did something related to AI. May someone heard about the style transfer stuff? It's like you transfer the photo stuff into animate like deals. So I think that helped me out for transfer. And like I mentioned before, I took some Python classes, stats classes, and did some training for coding and algorithm to find the internship. So I think that's the most thing I would recommend. And the second one is leadership. I was the president of the math club at Foothill, and I I held a series of training lectures for a math competition for community college students. May someone heard about it? It's called AMATYC, AMATYC, and that's a national competition. And I attended that before and ranked like top 20 nationally. And then the second year, I invited my friend from Stanford. He is a PhD student, and he became a lecturer to train the new incoming student at community college to get trained for that competition. So I mentioned that in my application. I think that made a lot of difference. And the third thing I would recommend is more personal. I mentioned how I finished the half marathon last year, and it's really tough for me, but I think that's a good way to show your personality, like your, like other than a nerd, other than a math guy, what you are personally. So I think you should mention something about your personality in your essays. Yeah, I think, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
that's
you.
it.
All right. Nicholas, for the same question.
So it's 2 or 3 things that we kind of recommend people do. Is that the question?
Do you want me to repeat it? It would be mostly like, 2 or 3 examples of the experiences that you feel are the most important when you transfer on your application, kind of like leadership, internship, volunteering, personal essays.
Yeah, I think it's like, if you can study abroad, do it. Don't look back. Like, if you can make it financially work for you to be able to study abroad and have that experience and intensively live overseas, have that experience. I cannot stress enough, at least for myself, and this is also influenced by my own personal journey in working in professional foreign affairs, so I'm biased, right? But I got a small grant called the Gilman Scholarship, which allowed me to go and do study abroad. I got $5,000 from the US government to fund a study abroad program while I was in community college. And I think, like, just looking for those kinds of opportunities that are out there that can make it financially possible for you to do something like study abroad, which you wouldn't necessarily think about doing. And the reality is, by the time you're at a 4-year school, something like study abroad feels impossible, or it feels very difficult. It feels very hard. And so if you have the time to be able to do that. I cannot stress, especially if you're interested in international career or languages or anything in international affairs. That's just a very important thing to do. And it helps you when you're actually on both getting into school, right, and getting into a 4-year, but then also on the flip side, like, the only reason I got hired in my job is because I'm a fluent Arabic speaker. And that was because I've done intensive Arabic study overseas that was paid for by different scholarships. And I'm happy to talk about that later in the breakout session. I would also say, just along that point, is feel free to take a gap year when you're in your community college. There isn't a rush, right? There really isn't. Like, for example, you can get a 1-year work visa in anywhere in the Commonwealth. So in Australia, New Zealand, UK, Ireland, Scotland, you can get a 1-year work visa and go work weird jobs over in the UK or Australia or New Zealand, right? And while that might not feel like a part of kind of a long-term plan, it's part of a long-term personal plan. And thinking about what kind of exciting things you can do while you're young, that kind of will keep you lit up. And that also makes for a more interesting application, right? If you're saying, I was in this track developing all of this, and then I went and took a year to go pick grapes in Australia, right? Or kind of whatever your situation is. And it gets harder and harder the further along you get to do those kinds of things. So if you have the chance to do that, I just recommend instantly take that opportunity. Whether that's a semester study abroad, summer study abroad, or a broader kind of gap year. So then, I guess, again, kind of echoing back what several other people have said too, and I want to reiterate everything that was everyone said, internships, leadership, all of that is super great. Like, that's kind of assumed in what I'm saying here. I'm just not repeating it because everybody else has already said it. But I would say write. Get used to writing about yourself. Get used to explaining your story. Get used to basically talking about who you are, right? Like, the reality is like, we all live in a world of, whether it's a graduate school application, a job interview, etc. People are always going to ask you, is like, distill your very complex humanity and complex multi-year journey and identity into something I can understand. And that maybe Joanna is probably better at that than I am as an English major. But it's important to it is important to think about that, right? And to think about how you consciously weave the threads of your life together in a way that is digestible. And so, yeah, that's just one of my points, and start that early. Don't hesitate to apply to scholarships when you're in community college, right? Don't vote yourself out. Let them reject you, right? Let people reject you rather than taking yourself out of the equation. It's always better to shoot a shot and miss than it is to never shoot the shot at all. And then I guess finally, going back to what Allison said, is start a venture, right? So if you are interested in saying, if you have 2 years on campus, 3 years on campus, however long, start something new, right? Like there's always something. When I was in my community, when I was at Foothill, I helped found the Honors Connection, right? So I helped found the Honors Connection for the Honors College back in 2016 when I was on campus. And then I also did a whole bunch of stuff with the local food bank, where we got a local food bank that then, local food bank that then connected Foothill community students and students who were food insecure on campus with a local food bank in Mountain View, right? And like, that's something that you can just do. Like, there's literally no barrier to entry. All you need to do is take the initiative to say, oh, hey, there's this food bank in Mountain View over here. There's a need here on campus. How do you connect that through your initiative and your time? So taking the initiative to do that as a student on campus is really, really important. And I think is also, when you think about things, both as your lasting legacy on your community college campus, but then also just in generally to live a rich life and kind of really, when you're thinking about the application process, fleshing it out, to not have it just be kind of a list of internships, jobs, etc. Those kinds of ventures and things that you start, you own, you claim are really, really important.
Yeah, Nicholas, that's actually funny because I started a food bank as well in community college it was around Thanksgiving, so around this time for individuals in Oakland. So it's kind of funny how we kind of mirrored that. But also I would +1 on everything you said in terms of there's so many things that have zero barriers to entry and you can just start right now. And you just have to think creatively as to what your passions are and what you can do in a short period of time.
Thank you. All right, Joanna, do you want to go ahead?
I feel like just be adventurous and be able to adapt, be open to new experiences. During my time at community college, I was involved with things on campus that had nothing to do with my major at all. I was involved in student government, but I was involved in the planning, social media aspect of, the student government and of our school. So that didn't really have anything to do with my major. It was more artistic based, being able to design posters, being able to create little messages, making sure we're getting our promotions across and making sure we're promoting our school, promoting, certain courses, and just giving the student body the valuable information that they think they will need when it comes to course load or it comes to resources on campus. So that had nothing to do with my major. And I just did it based kind of on a whim. I was like, this looks like an interesting opportunity. Let me go ahead and take it. Let's see what I can do differently, or let's see what I can challenge myself with. And honestly, just being able to see these opportunities, and again, even if you're uncomfortable or you feel like you don't really know how to do this, or you're unsure of yourself, just go ahead and do it. I would suggest just go ahead and take those opportunities. I was also, like Allison, working in a restaurant. That was an interesting experience for sure. It's honestly these kinds of small experiences, like your day-to-day work life or your day-to-day experiences outside of academics, I feel like really shapes you and your experiences at community college and as a transfer student. Because working in a restaurant and being surrounded by people all the time and having it be so busy, you really need to think quick on your feet in case something went wrong, in case an order got misplaced, or in case a customer is not happy with what they're eating. You need to be able to adapt those situations, be able to communicate with the customer base. And it's these kinds of experiences that help you think on your feet when you're a transfer student and when you're in such a busy environment like the university. If something goes wrong, if the printer runs out of ink and all of a sudden you need to run across campus to print something out, or you forgot to send an email that you should have sent yesterday and you're like, oh no, what do I do? Just these kinds of experiences really help you prevent these moments from happening, but also when these moments do happen, you know exactly how to react. You're like, okay, I need to stay calm. I need to have a game plan. This is what I need to do. This is what I need to do in order to fix this issue, or I can do something else in order to negate the fact that I can't print something or prevent these things from happening. So just be adventurous, be interested, find your passion, and be able to adapt.
And just quickly, I know we have to go on to the next question, but like that was such a great summary of why non-traditional skill sets are exactly what you need, right? That all of you who are here, if you've worked table, if you were a barista, if you were in a bar, if you bartended, right? If you're working construction, if you're doing admin stuff, if you're caretaking for a loved one, that's all stuff that we all do, especially in the community college community, which is by and large non-traditional, and most of us have had to have jobs while we are in school. Claim that experience, because Rome wasn't built in a day. People aren't born as the CEO of Google, right? Or like, that's just not how it works. Everyone at some point started out doing exactly the stuff that you're doing right now. And I can speak like in professional foreign affairs, the industry where I work in, diplomacy, right? The skill set that you just talked about, Joanna, about being able to manage customer relations, being able to do crisis management, being able to negotiate with people. That's the same stuff I do every single day, whether I'm sitting with across from Emiratis or Qataris, or I'm negotiating with a government, or like working on a project implementation. And it's the same stuff you learn working retail. It's literally the same skill set, except you just get, I guess, a fancier title. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is like, claim that experience and recognize the value of it as like, it's the training wheels that you're going to keep on using over the course of your 4 years at 2 years at CC, 2 years at a 4-year, and then onwards past that.
Thank you. Yeah, that summarizes it. So, okay, we have 10 minutes before the breakout room, so that way everyone can ask their questions. So we're gonna go ahead and have 2 more questions. The next one is, what's one thing you could have done to make your transfer application process easier if you had to think about it again? I know it's a difficult one, but yeah. So Allison, do you have any piece of advice for that?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say there wasn't anything I could have done, I think, to make it better. But one thing that I did that helped me a lot was I had my peers and my professors look over my applications, just because, you know, if you just stay in your room and write your applications all day long, you're not going to see things from an outside perspective. And I think everyone can relate to the fact that you just kind of, it gets to a point where you can't think anymore and you can get creative. So I would always highly suggest having I had my English professor look over my applications, as well as some peers who were very well versed in just application writing. So that's what I highly suggest.
Thank you. Asuka?
Yes. So actually, I spent 2.5 years before transfers. I will find.
Asuka, you're lagging a lot.
Started my schoolwork here. Oh, sorry.
Now it's a little better.
Is it better?
Yes, now it's fine. You can go ahead.
So I actually spent 2.5 years in community college in order to get into Berkeley, because to finish the coursework, 1.5 years is enough. But to increase the chance, I spent an additional year to take more classes. So if I would choose, I will know my interests earlier, and I studied AI stuff, the Python and stat stuff earlier, and I will find internship earlier, and I don't need to spend that additional year. Yeah, that's what I would say. Like, just find your interests, exploring courses, the field, like you might have your career in the future. Yeah, I just explore a lot, spend a lot of time, and in various fields. So that's actually wasted sometimes. Like, I took hardware, backend, front end, a lot of classes. So without any focus. So that's kind of waste some time.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's my suggestion.
Thank you, Asuka. All right, Nicholas.
I would say be clear about where you're going, right? Like understand what Berkeley requires from you, understand what 4 years require from you, understand kind of what a GETSI is, right? Talk with your academic advisors, make sure that at the end of the day, you are going to have to cross all your T's and dot all your I's, despite all of like the wishy-washy things I've been talking about, like, go do your passions, go do whatever it is. You do have to cross your T's and dot your I's. So make sure that you do get professional help, whether that's your like academic advisor, contact UC Berkeley, contact the schools you're interested in, right? Do research saying like, I'm interested in migration. I'm interested in like the southern border, right? Is there a professor that I might be able to reference in my application or reach out to say, hey, I'm interested in doing research with you? And do your homework is what I'm trying to say, because that will ultimately help you be able to navigate what is a bureaucratic process. And I think the reality is, despite all of our attempts to make our applications as personal, as well-rounded, it's a big bureaucracy. It's a numbers game. All of us have application numbers that are part of a systematic review. And that's just the simple truth of it, which all of you know. And all of us that have gone through it also know. So just make sure that there's no red flags that you can kind of avoid just by good planning. Try to get good advice as early as possible and then connect with the institution you're interested in as much as possible. And then that will give you the contextual information to submit your strong application and have the best chance for success, whether Berkeley or any other four-year college.
All right, thank you. Joanna?
My advice is a little more specific because I know the admissions ramp is coming up because it's due November, end of November. Please plan out your personal statements early. Don't wait until 2 weeks before, or don't even wait until the start of November. Because even though you are submitting the same application, the same personal statements to all the UCs, it is a very stressful process. Despite me being an English major, you would think I would have a good time writing personal statements. No, it was really hard. Not like, because there's a lot of intricacies in writing personal statements. You have to like put yourself out there, be confident, be a little bit arrogant, but also not too arrogant. Make sure you're telling your story, make sure you're answering the question, which I realized that it's actually really hard to do when I was looking over my own personal statements and also helping other people with theirs, that a lot of times you actually end up not answering the question because you're giving such a small word count limit. And a lot of the times it's really easy for you to just go off a tangent when you're trying to talk about yourself, so you don't actually end up answering the question. So make sure you're answering the question, make sure you're picking questions that you feel like you're most comfortable with. Of course, their personal statements, how can you be comfortable with all of them? So make sure you are writing on a personal question that you think you can draw from the most experiences that work the best with what you've experienced before in your transfer, your life as a community college student, what you can relate yourself to the most. And don't be afraid to ask for help. I asked 3 of my English professors for help. Might have been too much because some of their advice is a little bit contradictory. So make sure you're going to the right people, make sure you're asking for advice, and don't be afraid to delete parts of your personal statements if you're not happy with it. It's a very laborious process, and it is really heartbreaking when you feel like you wrote so much and then all of a sudden you're like, I don't like this. I think I need to start all over again. One thing I learned about being an English major is that you have to be comfortable with starting again. Like there's many times where I'm still writing my midterm essays where I found that this paragraph, it just doesn't make any sense within the context of the question. Just got to delete all of that and just start all over again.
Thank you. That was actually, yeah, I think a lot of people struggle with staying on the right track when writing their personal statement, including me. So our last question before we go on to the breakout rooms would be, why did you choose to transfer to UC Berkeley? And now that you're there, how was your experience over there? And what is your favorite thing about UC Berkeley?
So I transferred to UC Berkeley just because it was so entrepreneurial. I loved how everyone is very much forward thinking, and it's like the hub of innovation, I feel like. So I felt like it was exactly where I wanted to be, because I always wanted to be very entrepreneurial and start my own company. And so I have met so many entrepreneurs and so many people who are kind of going past the realm of the possible. And I enjoy thoroughly hearing about these things, and whether it be very STEM focused or very social impact focused. I just think Berkeley is the hub of such innovation. So I that's what I really enjoy about Berkeley, and that's kind of why I applied there. And so the second question was just one thing I like about Berkeley?
Yes.
Okay.
If you...
yeah, I would say it's pretty much just the hub of innovation, and I enjoy how everyone kind of isn't afraid to start their own thing. And I feel like I've grown so much at Berkeley, just because being around kind of these, it's so much better to be a small fish in a big pond. I feel as a student, and I always say if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. So Berkeley was always kind of that dream where I could just dream of being like growing myself, as well as kind of just growing the ecosystem around me.
Thank you.
So I choose Berkeley because it has the best CS department in all of the UCs, and it has lots of resources for ECS major. For example, they have the specific career fair for ECS, just for CS, and also they have the 5-year master program. It's like you spend additional 1 year in Berkeley and you get a master, you graduate as a master. So that's a lot of resources and opportunities. That's why I choose Berkeley. And for the differences between community college and university is the things are much harder in UC Berkeley. I actually repeat some courses in Berkeley, even though I have taken them in community college, because I want to build a better foundation for my upper division classes. So I spend average 20 hours on top of the lectures to prepare for the assignment, labs, projects, and exams. But in community college, I just spend 5 hours a week for that course, the same course. But I feel it's worthy because I feel I'm learning more, and my foundation is more is more actually I recommend repeat the series 61 series in UC Berkeley. I recommend just repeat them because you literally learn nothing in community college. It's like it's a totally different classes. I don't know why they're equivalent, but if you successfully transfer to Berkeley, I will recommend retake them because they are way better than those in community colleges. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you. All right, Nicholas?
Oh, sorry. I'm on the East Coast, so I apologize for that.
It's okay.
So honestly, I had no idea about Berkeley. That's gonna sound weird when I say this, but I knew it was a good school, but I had never really intentionally said it's Berkeley or bust, which I feel many people approach the process of Berkeley in that way. So I'm gonna just first off say is my reason for Berkeley and motivation for Berkeley was very antithetical. Actually, the reason why I ended up applying to Cal was 2 reasons. One is there's a subtle difference, and very, very subtle difference in the math requirement between UCLA and UC Berkeley. That meant that I could go to Cal and I couldn't go to UCLA in the year that I applied. It's a very subtle technical difference in their admissions requirements. And then actually because there was a professor, I had read a book on a niche topic about Moroccan Jewish history, North African Jewish history, from a historian at UC Berkeley. And I just got it in my head as a 19-year-old. I was like, you know what? I want to research with this person. I want to research this topic. And so I actually ended up getting coffee with that person, and who at that point, she was the director for the Center for Middle Eastern Studies. And we just hit it off, right? And so I think that was why, it was a very personal reason of why Berkeley. It was to work with this specific person. That was about something I was passionate about, and then now has actually turned into a lot of what I do, stemming from that, although I've now brought into other topics, not just North African Jewish history. But so I guess what I'm trying to, so for me, the reason why Berkeley was actually a relationship. It was a relationship with this professor, her body of work that I felt called to. I applied to UC Davis for the same reason, right? There's a professor there that was researching a similar topic. And so I think like that's kind of also why I tend much more on that side of the advising question is like, what motivates you? In the same way that Allison mentioned the entrepreneurial ecosystem, if your entrepreneurship is part of what drives you, yeah, like places like Berkeley or like Tsinghua, right, are like the two best places you could go for like that kind of work. And so, yeah, that's on that point. And then the second part of the question is about a part of Berkeley we really loved, right? So
Yes.
I want to reiterate that what Allison said is like being the dumbest person in the room is the best place for growth. Like I constantly felt imposter syndrome is absolutely real. Like, trust me, it never goes away. You're always going to feel like there's something wrong. Someone made a mistake somewhere. And just to be part of my French, but that's complete bullshit. It's complete BS. Like the reality is if you're able to get into these rooms, right, or into these rooms, into these environments, like that you deserve to be there. And anyway, if you made it past the gatekeepers, then you deserve completely legitimately to be there. And claim that, right? Claim that space. And I think like that's one of the really beautiful things about Cal is like, and the UC system more generally, roughly throughout the system, 35% of everyone are transfer students, right? My best friends from Berkeley, and I graduated 2019, right? It was the last time I was on campus. So I was from pre-COVID Berkeley, and I also want to name and acknowledge the fact that all of you are dealing with a very different college campus experience, right, than we are, than I did, and people in my generation at Berkeley did. But I think that is something, you're not alone. And I think that was the thing, that sense of the community college transfer student tribe at Cal was one of the most healing things for me. All my best friends were transfers, felt very supported by them and by other people that understand non-traditional and community college experiences. And that's something throughout the UC system, right? Roughly 35% of all students, more than 2.2 million in the entire community college system are at UCs. So I hope that kind of touches on it. But that sense of tribe and community, you're definitely not alone, even though Berkeley is a very large place.
Thank you. Joanna?
Like Nicholas, I was not Berkeley or bust either. I actually had no hopes to get accepted here. I was fully prepared to just stay in my bubble in Southern California. So I applied to 4 other UCs and I was like, you know what, just because I'm doing this application process anyways, I might as well just apply because Berkeley does have a very prestigious English program. So I was like, you know, it'd be great if I get in. If I don't, it's fine. I won't, you know, be upset or anything about it. So when I did get accepted, I was actually genuinely very surprised. And it was not my first choice either. I also got accepted to UCLA and I was highly considering going to UCLA because it's just more familiar territory, very familiar with that particular area. And it was pretty close to where I lived too, like a 2-hour drive. So on the weekends, if I wanted to, I could just go back home. But then I realized, like, I only have this experience once. It's only 2 years. We're already having 2 years at a community college and you only have 2 years at a university. And 2 years is very short. It goes by really quickly. Like you're sitting in your class one time and then all of a sudden you're graduating. So I was like, you know what? I want to make the most of this experience. It's only 2 years. It's a very short time. I'm going to be uncomfortable. I'm going to go to a place where I don't know the environment. I don't know anyone there. I've never been in such an urban area where public transportation is a huge thing. I've never been in an area where it's so condensed, where you can just walk anywhere. So I was like, I'm gonna go here. I'm just gonna go, and I did. And at first, it was definitely hard to adjust to how different it was from what I was so used to. But that's why I really enjoyed it because it brought me to new heights of being able to experience new things, of being uncomfortable, of meeting new people and meeting people from so many different backgrounds, people who are international students who transferred from very interesting circumstances, students who have such passions and really different interests from me, and just hearing their stories, hearing what they're like, seeing what they're pursuing, and just being in that student body with them. And one thing I do love about Berkeley is the student body. A lot of us are really involved in our own ways on campus, and one of my favorite things is the first 2-3 weeks of when school starts. Unfortunately, it's COVID, so we don't get this anymore, but it's when Club Rush is happening, and there's all these student-run organizations promoting their clubs, and there's basically everything for any interest you can think of, like from Harry Potter to specific languages to major specific student organizations. So I love how involved the student body is, how involved they are with the campus, how interested they are in their particular fields, in their particular side hobbies and interests. Like if you like something there, if you have a passion, whether it is knitting, whether it is reading, whether it is creating poetry or something, there's always a collective group on campus for you. And I just really appreciated that about Berkeley, how inclusive it was, and how even though it feels out of place and you never get over imposter syndrome. Like my second semester at Berkeley, I would still walk around campus constantly like, am I actually here? This feels really weird. This feels like a dream. You never get over imposter syndrome, but you can definitely find your collection of people and people who share interests and people who don't even share your interest. And it's just a really cool experience overall.
Thank you. Thank you for answering those questions. So now we will be having the questions from the audience. So they put them in the chat, and if you have any other question for everyone who is attending, please put them in the chat and I'll call your name so you can unmute yourselves and ask the question directly. So we have a first question from Yan to Nicholas. Yan, do you want to unmute yourself to ask your question?
Right, can everyone?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, this is a question for Nicholas. So he mentioned that that we can have our gap year and just really follow to our interests, like go to like a country, we can do like some fresh and weird things, right? So how do you think like the gap will influence the chance you get to like competitive universities? Because like university are expecting that you are like because when you are in CC, they know you're like consistently learning in the process. But when you fall into gap year, what they like worries that you like not learning enough or like losing like your kind of like study mode, right? So that's my question.
So I think if you look at the trend in American society, non-traditional is the new traditional. Every single person, look at top law school programs, top business school programs. People are now doing 2+2 programs to get into law school, get into business schools, right? Everyone across the entire educational sector and professional sector are putting a premium on difference, right? And claiming your own experience. We're not interested. Education as a cookie cutter model is dead. It's done. And that's why community college students and all of you, right? And non-traditional students and community college graduates, that's why we're a really interesting pool of people, right? Whether you're non-traditional or something else. And so I think like I'm not a application reviewer, but I think that many of these schools, if you don't just like take a year off, but if you intentionally and consciously do something, right? Like a friend of mine here who went to Danza College, he did internships here in Washington. So he worked on the Hill. So he got accepted to some UCs and then he took it off. He basically got accepted and then just deferred actually starting on campus because of COVID, and is working on the Hill. So he's working in the US Senate, right? As a sophomore or like an equivalent of a junior. And so he is now going to be going to do 2 years at Berkeley, but then having a full year of work experience in Washington, DC, which completely changes the name of the game when you're talking about getting internships, right? Or hitting the ground running when you get to Berkeley, because suddenly you're in a completely different category. So I think it's just more so of thinking, if you're considering doing a gap year, I'm happy. I did several gap years at different points in my life. And so I'm happy to chat about how to do that strategically. But I would just say I think it actually is an asset and would really help in the strength of applications. Especially also to private four-year schools. That's not just in the UC system, because the UC system is so huge, but if you tailor kind of what you're doing to a specific program at private four-year schools, that can also be a really good idea to do.
All right, thank you. That answered my questions.
All right, Next question is from Pamela to Allison. Pamela, do you want to unmute yourself?
Yeah, my question is, do you have any specific tips or things to avoid in regards to course planning?
I would suggest doing your own homework. I wouldn't suggest just solely putting like what your academic counselor tells you like as set in stone and as like the golden like plan. I would seriously do your own homework and contact the institutions directly to see what exactly is required in terms of course planning. And making sure you're meeting all of those major requirements. As I said before, and if anyone's interested, feel free to kind of message me on LinkedIn. But I've been working on a software solution that helps community college students find these major requirements and these course requirements and kind of consolidating it in one place. So I would love to give you guys advice, like real advice, as well as show you what we have cooking up. So.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Allison. So for the next question, let me get to it. Yes, so it's from Yoon. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name. It is a question to Allison. If you can unmute yourself and ask your question. If not, I will just read it. I'll go for it.
Yes. So I changed my major in the second year. So my first major was chemistry. So I took some chemistry major requirements classes. So all of the credit classes are towards my GPA, and it's just confusing right now. I'm filling out the UC application, and then should I like include all the credit classes I've taken and in the past, or should I just like include all the HOS requirements credit classes? It's just on the UC application.
Yeah, so first I would highly suggest seeing an academic counselor, just in case. I don't want to give you like, this is just like you know, don't you know, like I am not a professional, but I would say that you have to put all your classes down in the application. That's what I remember. But if I'm wrong, please anyone tell me I'm wrong. But I believe you have to put them all down just because they do an auditing process. So they want to ensure that the classes you put in were correct. So they'll take a look at your actual real transcript and kind of side by side it with what you manually put in. So I would hate for you to get into any trouble after you get in. So that's my advice, but I would definitely see a professional.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate you.
All right. Let me check in the chat box if we have any more questions. Okay, so there is a question from Ash to Asuka.
Hi, I am majoring in a STEM field, and I'm hoping I'm a kind of, I guess, a first year at community college, and I'm really concerned about my GPA because I've heard that you've had to, like, to be competitive at Berkeley, you have to at least have a 3.7. Like, how do you manage having like internships and also keeping up with your work and getting a 4.0?
Okay, thank you. That's a good question. So so before the interview, you know, if you want to have an internship, you need to do some, for my major, you need to do some training, coding stuff before the interview. So during those semesters, I only took 12 or 13 units, I don't remember, but just like 3 classes in order to get the workload manageable. So you need to balance, you need to see how you can handle it. If you feel it's hard to maintain the GPA, in the meanwhile, you have to find an internship or do the club stuff or do some competitions, then you need to reduce the units you are taking. And the second suggestion I would say is looking for some suggestions about the professors. So, you know, even though they are in the same classes, the different professors, they have different teaching styles and even different difficulty level. So there's one math teacher in Fihou, it's super hard. It's like the average GPA is like B or B minus. So just avoid those professors. It's like you use some website like Read My Professor, so you should know in advance the difficulty level of those professors. But if you want to challenge yourself, that's fine. But for the purpose of maintaining your GPA, just find some easier professors. That's my suggestion.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Our next question is from V to Allison.
Hi, so I have a question. Since I'm majoring in business, is it required to have like business internship or just joining really regular clubs at school?
Yeah, so it doesn't necessarily have to be business. I know plenty of transfers who are in Haas currently who played basketball for the entirety of their community college and was just really passionate about basketball, and they ended up transferring successfully. So it definitely does not have to do completely with business, but I would just make sure it has a lot to do with what you're actually passionate about, and make sure, one thing I always say is to make sure that you're doing something that you are genuinely passionate about and you're not just doing it for the resume builder or for the application. So just think about what you're passionate about and go for it.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay, so there is a question from Faye. No, actually it's from Yuka, but Faye sent it. So Yuka, do you want to unmute yourself to ask your question?
Yes, I'm Yuka. So I was wondering if you are transfer student applying this fall, how did you do for the COVID situation? Like how do you deal with it? For example, like if we cannot do volunteer this summer, but I actually wanted I wanted to do, but I couldn't, and then I found that other one. So do you have any idea or like advice for during this COVID situation? Thank you.
All right, so whoever of the panelists wants to answer that question, you can either all answer it or someone who has an actual answer to it.
I would just say, Yuka, this is kind of like the entrepreneurial side of me coming out, but in times of like distress and uncertainty, which is COVID, I always think there's always innovation to be made, whether it be like high tech or low tech. You can always do something that can better your current situation and even other people's current situation. So if I were you, I would really take advantage of the fact that, you know, we're in an unprecedented time, and just think about ways that maybe thinking outside of the box in terms of what you can do right now that would help kind of alleviate some of these concerns you have in terms of the more internship space and workspace. For GPA, I don't have any advice for that, to be honest. I'm still trying to figure it out myself as a current student. But for kind of the work aspects, I would seriously consider just thinking creatively and thinking of creative solutions for this kind of whirlwind of a time.
Thank you. Does Nicholas or Joanna or Asuka? Okay, go ahead.
Joanna or Asuka or Joanna, do you want to take it, or I can?
Oh, for honestly, it's really hard at this particular period of time, but I do know if you are on LinkedIn, that is definitely a great resource for a lot of students who are currently looking for internships or for opportunities, even though
we will try to mute people. I'm sorry about that.
It's okay, no problem. Basically, like that's a really good platform, and also Handshake is also a really good platform, or just the job portals or like internship portals that are available to your community colleges. Go online, because there, even though there's not a lot of opportunities right now, there's still a lot of places and companies and individual people who are looking for interns and looking for people who are volunteering. So those are all definitely great platforms. It'll definitely be a laborious process because it is quite competitive right now with the current work climate and with how many people, you know, are losing their jobs or people who are going back to school. So you do need to understand that you might send in like 20, 30 plus applications and you might only get like one response, or you might just get like multiple rejections to, be okay with that. It'll definitely be hard at first, but just keep pushing through, and you'll definitely get a response here and there. And just make sure you're tailoring your resume, make sure you're staying on top of things, make sure if a place asks for a cover letter, make sure you're writing a cover letter to appeal to the interests of the company and make yourself appealing as well, and as to how you can bring something new to the table. What makes you different from all the other applicants, and why are you super interested in this opportunity? It's kind of like how personal statements work. So I would recommend you checking out those online platforms.
And just to add on to that, which I think, like, honestly, just want to echo everything that Joanna just said. Like, basically just like put yourself out there. That's the first step. Put yourself out there. Let them turn you down. Because then they're the one that loses out on having you on their team. But I was going to say is also take it slow. Like, recognize that this is not a race. It really isn't. Even though you all, if you're 19, 20, 21, it might feel like things are kind of moving, you need to get somewhere in the next couple of years, right? If you take a year off for your mental health, your financial health, go do something different, that's not the end of the world. And I think one of the things that is important to understand, I definitely did not understand it before I transferred to Berkeley, was like, you only have 2 years when you're on campus. And so you only have 2 years. And that time goes by very fast. And I know from conversations with other friends of mine who are still on campus, right, that it's been hard because you arrive as a transfer student and then COVID hits, right? And it's an interruption of kind of the plan. And all of us in our own ways has to kind of think creatively about how we alter the plan and change the plan and roll the punches. And so what I would just really consider is go to your 4-year when you're ready. Like, go when you're like saying, I know kind of how I want to take the advantage of these 2 years. I know, like, I feel ready to make the most of it. Because if you rush it, whether it's in a problem like COVID or where it's like just so many structural problems that make it difficult, right, to navigate that. Or if just personally you feel like you need to work some more, you need to clarify a bit about how you want to go through college. Taking an extra year will not matter. Like, I'm just like, frankly, no one asks you when you graduate, right? Did you go to community college? Did you not? How many years did it take for you to go get your BA? No one cares. Like, no one cares at the end of the end of the tunnel. And so whatever you need to do, just in addition to all of this planning and being proactive and everything, listen to yourself, right? It's much better to approach this process with solid mental health and solid financial health. So that then when you hit the ground running, right, you don't just burn out or slide out, which can be a real problem sometimes if you try to jump the gun too quickly. And especially given the uncertainty of COVID, do something different, right? I already talked about like foreign language study, right? If you have the chance, like for example, when I went to Morocco, I spent 6 months at a language school in Morocco where the cost of tuition was $2,500 for 6 months of 3 hours a day of language training. So that's not for everyone. And that's a very niche interest of why I did that, right? But there's opportunities like that around the world that if you're talking about taking a gap semester, right? Go do something like language study, go do something else. And I think that that's just reiterating using the strategies that both Joanna and Allison touched on. Think creatively and outside of the box of how you can approach this time for your best mental and physical health too.
Yeah, just in addition, I just want to add some tips for my major. There are some online platforms still open for CS students like Kaggle.com and LeetCode. They have some online coding competition and you can participate in. And also there are some business competition like PBL. They are still open and they are happening remotely. So you still have the chance.
Thank you. So we'll take one last question before this session ends. We'll be a little bit over time, but Ruby, if you want to go ahead and unmute yourself to ask your question. If you're still here.
Hi, yeah. So there's a lot of great advice given for applications and things that make you stand out, like internships jobs or extracurricular activities like studied abroad or volunteering. And I was just wondering, in your opinion, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, there's fireworks going on. I don't know if you can hear that in the back. But I was just wondering which one you think is the most important or stands out the most and should be prioritized. And this is just for anyone that would like to answer.
Kind of repeating what Nicholas has been saying this panel, I would say that there really isn't a value to be placed on either of any of these things, and there isn't really like a set in stone kind of like evaluating system that these admissions officers do. I would seriously just go after what you feel most passionate about and your own kind of hierarchy of what you think is important to you. Really just kind of tapping into your own personal story is so important, and I would just reiterate that.
I do think in addition to that, which I think is ultimately the case, make it about you, right? It's about, if you shine, if you're doing something you care about and you're passionate about in whatever, whether it's like in my case was Moroccan Jewish history, right? Like that's not something that anyone advises you to go and specialize in, right? But it's what I did, and it's what kind of has gotten me along everything since then. And so if you follow the thing you're passionate about, then that means that therefore you're going to excel at it. You're going to take the extra hour to go and do it a little bit better, right? And if you, thinking of where you have, to use economic terms, right, that marginal benefit, right, where that extra hour costs you less. Where you can spend is like, what is the thing that makes me happy, right? What is the thing where my passion and professional interests align to the point where it doesn't feel like work? That means you're going to do it better, whether that's volunteering, starting a food bank, study abroad, language study, doesn't really matter specifically. It's whatever's yours. And that's what's going to make your application shine. That's what's going to make your recommendations deeper, right? It's what's going to make your professional experiences deeper and richer. So yeah, I just want to add that in.
Does Joanna or Asuka want to add anything about that?
Kind of just reiterating on what Nicholas said, there's no particular internships or extracurriculars that I think you need to pursue. Just find interest, really. It doesn't even have to pertain to your major. Like I was saying before, how I seeked out a lot of opportunities that weren't necessarily what I was studying, but still I found were enriching as an entirety part of my experience. So honestly, as long as you feel like something would interest you, whether that be graphic design, journalism, or just non-academic pursuits, just for your own personal gain, go and seek out those opportunities, because oftentimes they make you a more well-rounded student and a better rounded, applicant as well, because those are experiences that no other person has, and those are interests that potentially no other person will have either, like Nicholas was saying, and it makes you a more unique individual, and it makes you stand out as an applicant. And it just shows that you're confident in these interests and these pursuits, that you're willing to take in that extra time, you're willing to put in extra effort, you're willing to take extra courses and, pursue these interests on your own, rather than having someone say, oh, this is what you need to do in order to apply to school. You need to do A, B, C, and D, and following strictly to that kind of formula, because oftentimes it makes you look like every other student who is also following that formula, because a lot of students end up just going to the A, B, C, feeling I get C, taking those academic courses, taking, extracurriculars that they think will make them stand out, but is pretty cookie cutter at the end of the day. So making sure you seek out those opportunities, don't be afraid to pursue things that aren't outside of your major, outside of your curriculum. Go ahead and do those things.
And just to throw onto that too, recognize that you're in a position of power, right? You are young, you have voices, you have free time, right? Like those are things that are very powerful. For example, like when I was at, some of you who are on this call from Foothill College might know Scott Langford. And so he and I, with a couple of other, Liza Mamadov and a whole bunch of other transfer students at Foothill College, when basically when the Muslim ban, the executive order came out in early 2017, we actually organized a sit-in basically at the Mountain View City Hall, right? That was organized by students, mobilized by students, and was something that we organized, and people listened to us because we were students, right? And so recognize that you're actually, even though I know it feels when you're in a society And I put a link in the chat to a great New York Times article about how four-year schools are actually shifting towards community college recruitment. We live in a society where community college pathways are stigmatized, and like the people tell you like, you won't get a return on your email, you won't get a return on your whatever, right? So it's about making your own opportunities, and it's about recognizing that when you have vitality, when you have a youth voice, when you have time to be able to devote to a project or initiative, those are all fonts of power that you can use to create something lasting. And so get involved in politics, right? Get involved in your campus. And those are the kinds of things that ultimately you need to figure out for yourself how those threads will be pulled on and where they'll go. And there's no roadmap for that. But I think that's what makes it uniquely your story and not any of ours that are up here talking.
Thank you. Asuka?
Yeah, there's a mentorship program for transfer students called Starting Point Mentorship in Berkeley. It's from Berkeley's Transfer Student Center, and it's a great program to get help for your application. And also it's a great program to put in your application, like the activities. So you have 20 activities to put in your application, and that's a good one to put in. I'll put the link into the chat, and if you guys are interested, you can try to apply for that program. And we will be matched with a current Berkeley student with your same major and possibly from your same community college. And you and he or her will like communicate once or twice a week, and you can get more like detailed information about the application and transfer process, something like that. Yeah, that's what I want to add.
Thank you. So I see that people are asking for you to put the link in the chat. So thank you for doing it. Thank you. All right, so it's 9:04, so we're gonna end the session there. I wanted to thank you, all the panelists, for coming in today and giving such good advices and taking the time to talk to community college students in the middle of the whole process of transferring. Also, I wanted to remind everyone that we will have another transfer panel next week. So next Saturday 10th at the same exact time, which is 7:30 p.m. for UCLA. So you are welcome to register for it. You can find the link on our website under the Transfer Series section, and you will see all the upcoming panels. So thank you everyone for attending today, and thank you to our panelists. I will stop sharing now. Goodbye. Thank you.
Goodbye.
Thank you, everyone. Good luck.